It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Yesterday afternoon, Democratic Governor Tony Evers released an emotional video on social media announcing his plans for the 2026 election.
It's why, Wisconsin, I'm announcing that I will not be running for a third term. I'm so humbled to be your governor. This is the best job I ever had.
In the 2-minute video, Evers talks about how his family has sacrificed to support him in his 50 years in public service and that being governor was the best job he ever had. Evers' announcement is a shakeup in Wisconsin politics. For the first time in 16 years, the state will see a wide-open race for governor. Here to talk about this moment is Sean Johnson, WPR's Capitol Bureau Chief. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me.
You characterize this as a bombshell decision in your reporting on the announcement. Were you surprised?
Yes and no. I mean, I think based on the assumption that I had for most of this year, it was surprising because I thought for months that the governor was going to run for a third term. That was the signal that, his people were sending. It was just the going assumption in state government that it was going to happen. I would say definitely for a week, maybe a little bit more, it started to look like he might be out just based on conversations I was having. Either way, though, it is just such a big decision because the governor is so powerful in Wisconsin. And, typically people just don't want to leave politics when they have it all in a way. And that's what Tony Evers is doing here. He's saying it's someone else's turn.
Talk a little more about what he said about not running for another term, what kind of points he was making in this video.
It was, it was a couple minutes of a recorded message. So it's not like a press conference where he took questions, but he did. It was family. It was what he pointed to. Remember that before he was governor, Tony Evers was state superintendent of public instruction and won 3 terms there. So he's been running statewide campaigns for a while now. He referenced, a 50-year career in public service because he was an educator and school administrator prior to getting into, statewide politics, and said, he couldn't have done it without his family. And so now it's time to focus on them.
So wide open race with Evers, this would be, I guess, since 2010 with no incumbent in the race.
Right.
Scott Walker won that race and was in office for 2 terms. What might take shape on both sides of the aisle with Evers out of the race?
Well, I guess the thing I'm reminding myself of is that it is very easy to say you might want to run for governor at this point in the race. And it costs somebody nothing. They just can say, I'm thinking about it. People are encouraging me to run. And so based on sort of that low barrier to entry, you have a lot of people right now who are saying that they might get into the race. We'll see how many of them actually take the steps to form a campaign and how long it lasts. All that said, it does feel like it could be a pretty big primary on the Democratic side and potentially the Republican side too, just based on the types of people who are throwing their names out. And, not having an incumbent just makes it feel winnable to people who are on the fence. I mean, if you're in politics and think that someday you might want to be governor, running when there's no incumbent in the race is a pretty good time to give it a shot.
Mm-hmm. Well, take us back to 2018 when Evers was first elected as governor. How many candidates threw in their hat at that time? What was the political context at that time compared to now ahead of 2026?
I've been thinking a lot about that race because my memory was that in the winter before the 2018 election, so we'll say December 2017, I want to say there were 13 Democrats who had said they were running, something like that, or around a dozen candidates. That's a lot. I mean, there were people I'd never heard of who were jumping into the race for governor because they felt like, hey, this is a good time to jump into this thing. There's no clear front runner. The big primary means the vote's going to be divided, and so you had a massive Democratic primary that Tony Evers won handily. We know how that went now. I do think that the moment is similar. I mean, I think that when we look back at the time we're living through right now, the history books will probably say, hey, a lot was happening in 2025. But politically speaking, the 2018 election was a Trump midterm. I mean, it was a time when Democrats were out of power in the White House, and that tends to mean good things for them. And so you had a lot of Democrats jumping into that race to take on then Republican Governor Scott Walker.
We're talking with Sean Johnson, Capitol Bureau Chief at WPR, about Governor Evers' announcement yesterday that he will not be seeking re-election and what this means for the political landscape in Wisconsin ahead of the 2026 election. Sean, let's get into some names here. We heard, of course, this morning, Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez is throwing her hat into the ring, announcing her bid this morning. What can you tell us first on the Democratic side about possible people in the field?
Yeah, she wins the race for being first to formally announce.
Okay.
It's official. But it's close because other candidates are practically there. Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley sent out a press release from his campaign today saying, in the weeks ahead, I will be taking steps toward entering the race for governor. The stakes are simply too high to sit on the sidelines. So, you could say David Crowley arguably was right up there in front with Sarah Rodriguez, but not a formal announcement yet from him.
Okay.
Other people who might run: Attorney General Josh Kaul, Secretary of State Sarah Godlewski, Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson has said, I would be interested if Tony Evers didn't run. State Senator Kelda Royce of Madison. I talked to former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes yesterday, who was Tony Evers' lieutenant governor his first term. He said he's thinking about the race. And former Democratic Party Chair of Wisconsin, Ben Wickler, is a potential candidate. He is known nationally for his fundraising prowess.
Okay, so I forgot to count there. I wasn't counting on my fingers, but it seems like there's a lot of names in the mix. What about on the Republican side?
On the Republican side, we already have a couple people prior to the governor's decision who had entered the race. Washington County Executive Josh Schoeman, businessman Bill Berrien were already formally candidates. A couple possible contenders at least. Congressman Tom Tiffany has sent pretty strong hints that he wants to run for governor. And then yesterday, I don't know if it was a real hint or just like kind of having a little fun during a news cycle, but former Governor Scott Walker sent out this tweet.
Interesting.
Try to describe it the best I can. It was a picture of a Make Wisconsin Great Again hat, in the style of the Trump Make America Great Again hat. It said 45-47 on the side, which that refers to Trump's first term in office, 45th president of the United States, and the 47th president of the United States. Incidentally, as Scott Walker knows, he was the 45th governor of Wisconsin. And if he were to win next year, he would be the 47th governor of Wisconsin. So he presented this he just said interesting. And an earlier version of a tweet or a post on X from Scott Walker had a little winking emoji. He took that out later in the day. I don't know why. But so Scott Walker wants people to know, hey, I'm a pretty prominent Republican. And, what about me?
So we've seen really high dollar races in Wisconsin elections. And then looking back to 2022, the governor's race set a record for spending by candidates and outside special groups, reaching over $164 million. What could be in store for spending in this race?
I would say a lot of money. I'll just go out on a limb and say it's going to be expensive because in 2022, you had a Senate race also. And so donors were kind of divided into, where their money was going. There was a big Senate race between Republican Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes, which was very close. And that was huge. We don't have that this time. There's just the governor's race in terms of big statewide races. I mean, there are other constitutional offices that will be on the ballot in November, like Attorney General, et cetera. But there's no Senate race to pull money away. So there's going to be a lot spent on this governor's race, given all the stakes and how much power the office holds.
The legislature has been under Republican control since 2011. Democrats are also trying to flip control there as they try to hold on to the governor's office, the veto pen. What is the strategy, and is this party united?
I don't know that you can look at sort of the debates that Democrats are having nationally for the most part right now and say that it's a united party. I think there's a real struggle for the direction they want to go in this age of Trump, the second term of Trump, when so much is happening in Washington. And, the party is sort of trying to decide, who are we going to be? Are we going to attack this really aggressively and kind of shift to the left, or are we going to move to the right a little bit and moderate? Those are questions that get asked every time a party's out of power, and especially in primary season. And I think you're going to see that play out, especially if you have, more than a half dozen Democrats running. You'll get to see a little microcosm of the debate over the future of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin.
So this is all happening a full year ahead of the election. It's taking place in November 2026. Remind us of primary season and when you think the details of this race will come into clear focus for voters.
I think the reason you're seeing candidates jump in right now is because while the race is more than a year away, it's kind of it's time. I won't say it's late, but you have to run for governor now if you're going to do it. There's only so much time for these candidates to mull whether or not they're going to get into the race, because as some of these bigger names potentially jump into the race, supporters are going to kind of sort out to one camp or another. And so I would say over the next month or so, you're going to see most of the Democrats who are going to do this get in there and announce their intentions. Certainly by winter, I think you'll know generally who's going to run on the Democratic side. And I think there could be a similar time frame on the Republican side, though. In the last election cycle, it played out a little later than that. Republicans had a shakeup late in the cycle that saw them eventually nominate Tim Michels as their candidate for governor.
Sean, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate.
That's Sean Johnson, WPR's Capitol Bureau Chief. Coming up on Wisconsin Today, two perspectives on running restaurants in our state in an uncertain economic climate and how tariffs may affect dining out.
There's going to be a lot of streamlining, changing menus, dropping menu items.
Because we're going to have to pay for it. We're going to have to pass that cost on to the customer. There's no other way about it.
That's ahead on WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. President Trump's tax cut and spending package that is now law contains numerous provisions for businesses, including the restaurant and hospitality industry. The head of the National Restaurant Association said the pro-growth tax policies contained in the law will strengthen the food service industry. According to the trade group, among the benefits for restaurant operators is the ability to fully expense capital equipment purchases. As the Big Beautiful Bill Act moved through Congress, the Wisconsin Restaurant Association also came out in support of it. But at the same time, the president's push for tariffs and shifting policies on immigration have created new waves of uncertainty in the restaurant industry. Here to talk about the economic conditions is Susan Quam, Executive Vice President of the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. The trade group represents thousands of food service or hospitality venues in the state. Susan, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
The association had come out in support of several provisions in President Trump's sweeping legislation. Now that it is law, what key changes is your association most anticipating and supportive of?
Well, there's a couple very key areas that we were in support of in the recent reconciliation bill. A lot of that was extending tax cuts for small businesses that were laid out in 2017 and were scheduled to expire. And we wanted to see those tax cuts extended and made permanent. So that did happen, and that's a very, very good news for all of our restaurant operators in Wisconsin, the vast majority of them being small businesses and independent operators.
Which of those specifically in these tax savings have you seen restaurants not only appreciate but really get help from?
The biggest one is the 20% qualified business income deduction, or QBI. And that's for pass-through businesses, which is what the majority of our independent and small franchisees are. And it allows them to basically bring down their effective tax rate from 37% to just a little more than 29%. And that kind of creates parity with the larger businesses that also received tax cuts back in 2017. So this was a very important addition and change that was made when the original cuts came through, that our businesses really, especially post-COVID, definitely rely on to stay afloat and stay being able to keep their doors open. But there's other ones too, like business interest expense deduction, being able to utilize calculation of interest in some of their deductibility areas, so they can free up some capital either to pay off debt or make additional investments. We have they've made permanent the family and medical leave tax credits. So if a operator chooses to offer paid family and medical leave, they do get a tax credit for that. It allows you to fully expense capital equipment purchases in the year that you purchase them versus having to depreciate. So those are all really very important for the day-to-day business operations in order for our folks to maintain that very narrow 3% average profit margin that they have.
I want to talk about that. Some restaurants run on these razor thin margins, and debt is an issue. Have these particular tax incentives, do you see restaurants able to expand because of their ability to have some of these incentives? Or what do you see there?
Well, I think we do see a combination. We'll have some operators who are going to be able to take advantage of and possibly expand or open up another location because they are now know this with certainty where they're going to be starting in 2026 from a tax standpoint. So they might be able to make those investments, take on that additional debt that they would have to make those expansion and kind of know where they're going to be. I think with other operators, this is purely, they're still with all of the other increases in expenses that we've had since 2020, that this is just something that helps them continue to stay afloat with the footprint that they already have.
One of the items that's been talked about is the tax deduction for servers and bartenders who are earning tips. How big of a deal is that for the restaurant industry in Wisconsin?
I think it's a huge deal. I mean, when you have, in an industry, especially for our industry, where those positions, a huge portion of those positions are filled by people who want to work part-time and are either putting themselves through school or bringing in a supplementary income into their family. So to be able to deduct or not have to pay income tax on that first $25,000 in tips is really, really important. I mean, that's going to be a huge, boost to their bottom line and their take-home pay. And it also incentivizes people to make sure they do declare 100% of their tips, because then they also still have their Social Security and all of the other types of programs that are out there accurately recording their information and their income, so that when it's time to get a car loan or buy a new house, they have a full and robust W-2 to have out there. So along with the $12,500 tax deduction for overtime pay, overtime premium pay, that's also great for every hourly employee in the restaurant industry, whether you're front of the house or back of the house, because that also helps them put more money in their pocket if they're working overtime. So those are huge for our employees. They're huge in putting more money in their pocket, and many of them, especially college students and others who are working part-time, it really helps them.
What about back of house? What about the dishwashers and, people preparing the food? What can be done to help kitchen staff?
Well, one of the reasons that we have a tip credit provision in labor law is so that more money can be given to the back of the house employees that aren't allowed to get tips. And that's the hard part. Now, mandatory tip pooling and other types of things are dictated by federal law and what you can and cannot do as far as tip sharing within the industry. So this helps operators pay those employees more. In addition, that if any of those employees are working any overtime because they picked up a shift in a week to cover somebody else or something like that, then they're able to take advantage of that tax deduction on overtime premium pay as well, which would put more money in their pocket.
Turning now to tariffs, President Trump setting the deadline of August 1st for other countries to negotiate with the U.S. ahead of tariffs. How would tariffs impact Wisconsin restaurants? What do you see?
Well, we are seeing reports, from restaurant operators, that they're kind of getting bounced up and down as far as the pricing of their of their products as tariffs are threatened and maybe go into effect for a couple days and then come back. So it's kind of volatile in our wholesale, especially in the wholesale food price area right now. We are seeing some increases. I think some importers and suppliers are just putting in some increases in place just to cover themselves should tariffs appear in a very quick fashion, and they're kind of trying to preemptively strike that. So it is causing some increase in prices. I think what our operators are doing is taking a hard look at their menus and seeing where they can streamline, where they can source from other places, what changes they may need to make should something, come into place. But in just the last 5 years, our average food costs have gone up about 40%.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a tremendous increase. We have unlike a grocery store, restaurants and the restaurant industry has a much narrower tight list of products, and especially in the food area that we use. And a lot of those products have gone up exponentially in price, not just and tariffs are just adding on to the top of that. It's not that's not the cause of those price increases. Labor prices, wages have gone up at least 35% since 2020. And then now credit card processing fees are also the third highest cost. So you couple all of that together and it's putting quite a bit of pressure back on menu prices. And that's probably where, and I think, consumers have seen menu prices going up about 5% a year. You're going to see it continue to go up until some of those price increases are stabilized.
In these times of economic uncertainty, what is the sentiment you're hearing from Wisconsin restaurant owners in terms of trying to build and grow a business in these times? Is that possible?
It's possible, but I can tell you that we do have a lot of folks who are, definitely slowing down in how fast that they're making those types of expansion opportunities. They're really wanting to make sure that they have everything in place, that they have plenty of capital in place or solid customer base before they can do any type of growth or expansion. It's right now, especially for an independent operator, opening a restaurant has its challenges depending on where you are located, whether there's enough employees available for you to staff that type of operation, or whether you have a customer base that's willing to pay the menu prices needed in order to make that 3% profit margin. So I think we have some guarded optimism at the moment for the industry. I would say people are feeling better. Our polling, at the National Restaurant Association says that operators are feeling better than they did 3 months ago. But they're still obviously pretty guarded in how fast they want to be putting themselves out there financially.
Susan, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Happy to talk anytime.
That is Susan Quam, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. Now for another perspective on the impacts of this sweeping tax cut and spending law, we turn to Dan Jacobs, the head chef and co-owner of Esther Ev and Dan Dan in Milwaukee, and a runner-up on the 21st season of Top Chef. He's also a board member of the Independent Restaurant Coalition. Dan, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thanks for having me.
You signed this letter along with hundreds of chefs nationwide who opposed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is now law. Why did you oppose this domestic agenda?
So, I mean, there's a couple reasons, and the state of restaurants right now, it's tough. I mean, it really is, and I don't think we need any more obstacles in our ability to, um, just have a viable business. And the One Beautiful Bill, there's a couple points in there I think that really, um, first one, the no tax on tips seems like it's something that's very helpful. But it's really not that great. It's only up to the first $25,000 that you make, and that's if we could take a step back, servers have this sub minimum wage, which is allowed in the state of Wisconsin. So they're dependent on tips. So $25,000 is not a lot of somebody's yearly salary. I would say our servers probably that's less than half of what their yearly salary is going to be. So then they're still going to get taxed on their tips. They're just not going to get taxed on that first 25,000. But it also sets like a precedent that's really hard for us to maintain, which is again this gap in pay between the front of the house and back of the house. Back of the house is always, and I'm talking speaking about the kitchen, is historically a these are people that work in kitchens are probably some of the most vulnerable people that we have. This is where we have people that that can't really fight for themselves, and it just kind of sucks.
Okay, I just want to stop there. I mean, the letter calls no tax on tips, quote, harmful and short-sighted. In terms of the short-sighted part, can you talk more about even why more dollars on the near term wouldn't be helpful to servers?
I mean, it's not that it's not helpful to them, but it's short-sighted in the fact that it only helps a certain part of the population, like of a restaurant. So this is only going to help out, one half of that restaurant, while the other half is just left behind.
You have other issues with this domestic agenda. Can you talk further? What else do you see here?
Well, one of them is scary to talk about because you worry about like I think other restaurant owners and as well as myself worry about like backlash about talking out against some of the administration's just some of the things with ICE enforcement. I mean, the people that work in restaurants are people that sometimes these are jobs that we don't have anybody else who want to do them. And if you take that away, I think you take away the ability for restaurants to be a place where people can gather, where you can have those special occasions.
Have you taken any steps to help to protect your employees?
I think this is the crazy part is that we literally in pre-shift have, trainings on what to do if, ICE does come into the restaurant. And that's something that I never thought I would ever have to do. I never thought I'd have to have these sort of training things. We have signs up for the employee only areas. But there's a lot of gray area and, we just want to keep our people safe and working and productive. Like none of the people who work for us are bad people. Like they're not, they're great. Like literally, and they've worked for us for years and years. And I just want that to continue.
I want to turn to tariffs. There are so many concerns that these are going to have such a huge impact on people's pocketbooks and their spending and their habits for eating out. And you've been writing about this. Can you give us any update about how you think tariffs might affect everything from buying equipment to who shows up for dinner?
Stuff that scares me is stuff that we're bringing in. So we bring in, like black vinegar from China. We bring in fish sauce from Thailand. These things are all going to go up in price. Like there isn't really makers of this in the United States. Like nobody really makes this in the United States. So the only way we're going to be able to get around that, and I actually don't know how we're going to do that. I think when you look at restaurants that buy French wine, they're going to have to either start thinking about maybe not buying French wine or like that price is going to go up. It's sad because I think these are things that, again, I think people that voted the way they didn't realize what these things were, but this is exactly what it is. I don't think they understand how tariffs work. I don't think people fully grip what that is. It's not the government paying for it or somebody else's government paying for it or or the producer in that country paying for it. It literally is the consumer who's going to pay for these tariffs.
What's the ceiling here? How much can restaurants pass those costs on, do you think?
That's a great question. I think the only way you can answer that is based on the consumer and what they're willing to do, what they're willing to go out for. I think it's definitely gonna change how people dine here and in Milwaukee. Like, I think people are going to be more selective. And I think they're going to be less eating out. So if you ate out once a week, maybe you only eat out twice a month now.
Are you finding like-minded chefs who are politically energized to get in the middle of these debates?
I think it's really tough because I think there's a legitimate fear of backlash, especially with this administration. Like, I think you have this, you want to protect your people, but you want to make sure you also want to, I want to be a voice, for my industry, but I also don't want things to come back on the people that work for us. So I think it's a tough line.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
Dan Jacobs is the head chef and co-owner of Esther Ev and Dan Dan in Milwaukee, and he was runner-up on the 21st season of Top Chef. Earlier, we heard from Susan Quam, Executive Vice President of the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. We talked about the current economic climate for operating restaurants in Wisconsin and how the federal government's new tax and spending law will impact these establishments. Still ahead on Wisconsin Today, Sauk City native Dan Lepine brought us the catchy song God Bless Quick Trip. He's now on tour with his debut album that is a tribute to honky-tonk traditional country.
The older I get, I feel like the more I lean into the, I guess they call it harder country, and a lot of that is the sadder songs.
That conversation is next from WPR News. You're listening to Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. It's time for Wisconsin Life. Here's producer Bridget Bowden with a story about a first-of-its-kind tribal national park in Wisconsin. It's part of WPR's Wisconsin Road Trip series, which features pit stops across the state to explore some of the people, places, and things that make Wisconsin summers special.
Frog Bay Tribal National Park has hiking trails, shoreline, and wetlands. The nearly 200-acre park on Lake Superior is a great place to go for a run or to look out on the Apostle Islands. For members of the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, the land also holds a special meaning. WPR's Trevor Hook brings us this story on the park's history and significance.
Shogabuikwe Misty Nordine grew up less than a mile from the shoreline that's now part of Frog Bay Tribal National Park. She is a member of the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. She also teaches in an Ojibwe language immersion program. Her grandfather was one of the driving forces behind making this area on the shore of Lake Superior into the nation's first tribal national park.
This is my favorite part of the trail because I can remember once we got to here, we were almost there. And as we turn this corner and we get around that corner, that smell will hit you. There's that big pine tree. And in the summertime, it just hits you like a wall.
Nordine says tribal elders like her grandfather pushed for the creation of the park to ensure access to the area after decades of conflict between property owners and other tribal members restricted access to this land. Frog Bay Park being a tribal national park means that it's not affiliated with the National Park Service. The Red Cliff tribe has control over the land. Nordine says she still remembers the first time she walked this trail again after it became a part of the park.
I cried because I hadn't smelt that smell in that way, turning that corner like I did as a little girl every day of every summer. until that moment.
What today is a 175-acre park first opened in 2012 after the Red Cliff tribe purchased the land from local property owners. The park and the nearby 300-acre conservation management area have wetlands and a freshwater estuary, as well as a boreal forest, a diverse ecosystem that's rare in Wisconsin.
So I don't know if I could say the exact age of this forest, but I would estimate some of these trees are upwards of 200 years old. Some of these white pines probably are pushing older than that.
That's Giwedin Gwangabo Ron Nordin Jr., a wildlife technician with the Red Cliff tribe. He's also Shagabuikwe Misty Nordin's husband. He was introduced to this stretch of the beach after they were married nearly 30 years ago. At the end of the trail, there's a single white bench facing Lake Superior. You can see 5 of the Apostle Islands from this spot, as the gravel trail gives way to a sandy Lake Superior beach. Red Cliff Natural Resources Director Ashley Hinker likes to hit the trail on her lunch breaks.
And if you go fast enough, the bugs can't get on you.
Hinker says the federal government's history of taking land from Native Americans makes having a tribal national park especially valuable.
This park is a really big and really important victory for the tribe, and a really important way that the tribe has asserted their rights as a sovereign nation.
For Shagabuikwe Misty Nordin, Frog Bay is a piece of her grandfather's legacy.
That's embedded in us and who we are. That's part of our teachings, is we don't just look out for ourselves. We're always looking 7 generations ahead, and we're always looking 7 generations behind.
For her, it will always be the place she went as a kid to swim in the summers and to pick blueberries for her grandma.
WPR's Trevor Hook brought us that story on Frog Bay Tribal National Park. Wisconsin Life is a co-production of Wisconsin Public Radio and PBS Wisconsin. Additional support comes from Lowell and Mary Peterson of Appleton. I'm Bridget Bowden.
Join us every Friday this summer for more Wisconsin road trips. To see all the stops and plan your own road trip, find the series page at wpr.org/road trip. This is Wisconsin Today. Sauk City native Dan Lapine is a country artist who keeps it simple and traditional with pedal steel guitar, fiddle, and deep, twangy bass vocals. Lapine is out with his first album with 10 original songs, but his viral moment came in 2023 with a song that's as Wisconsin as it gets, declaring his love for Quick Trip.
Take the 6-pack of Dunkers, Angus cheeseburgers, sweet Karuba coffee buns, hash brown potatoes, roller tornadoes, hit me with that nature's touch. Long johns with Reese's, breadsticks that tease us, one stop for all your love. Man, I just gotta say, God bless Quick Trip.
Lapine is on tour for his album called The Honky Tonk Traditional. He plays the Monroe County Fair tonight and has over 20 stops around Wisconsin in the coming months. Dan Lapine, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me.
It seems like Quick Trip got dumped for the Honky Tonk Jukebox. What is drawing you to this love of traditional honky tonk music?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, I don't want to say Quick Trip got dumped because I still rock with them a lot. And I'm still there all the time. But yeah, honky tonk traditional country, you know, it's I guess that's a good way to describe the sound that I've found with my music and the sound that I have fallen in love with, I guess, the past, 7 years since I decided to start doing this and make this my career and my life. And just a big lover of classic sounding country, whether it is from 1970 or whether it's from 2025, so it all kind of comes back around in cycles. So there's traditional country from all kinds of different eras, and I just love all the traditional stuff.
It seems like God Bless Quick Trip really had a very specific storytelling element to it. And I found myself thinking of meandering through the aisles with the lyrics. And it was a little more tongue-in-cheek, and I felt a little more, in this new album, it feels a little bit slower, sadder, more reflective. Can you talk about just some of the themes that you're bringing up?
Yeah. A fun thing about country music is you kind of go back and forth. You got the slow songs, you got the sad ones, you got the fun, more party songs. And the older I get, I feel like the more I lean into I guess they call it harder country, and a lot of that is the sadder songs. So those are they're fun. They really hit, and the instrumentation is always so sweet on those. And we had some really good players on the album, and I think they captured that really well.
You were born in Sauk City. When did you first start listening to country?
I didn't listen to it a whole lot growing up. It's more like I lived it, but I was more a metalhead, believe it or not. I would say it wasn't until I was 22, 23, and I took a trip to Nashville with my parents and saw these kids playing, mostly cover songs, but making an okay living doing it. And I was like, man, I could start doing that, and I could write music as I go and just continue to develop the craft. And that's just what I did. I started playing in bars, one night a week, 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week, and did that for several years. And it's been about 7 years now. So.
Well, let's hear a track. We're going to listen to Neon Dream, and this is off your debut album, The Honky Tonk Traditional. Let's listen.
Goodbye, heartache. Hello, neon dream. So long, lonely. Welcome, honky tonk queen. Where have you been all of my life? Don't wake me till the morning light. Hello, neon dream.
What inspired Neon Dream?
That one is just about a guy who's going out and drinking a few beers and seeing where the night takes him, which was, something I've always enjoyed, but it's more of a storytelling of my younger years, I suppose.
A thread that keeps coming up in some of your songs is how you're, tired of seeing sunsets alone and, cowboys coming home. And it kept me thinking about how maybe you too really looked forward to coming home or staying in one place for just a moment. Is that something you wrestle with?
Yeah, definitely, because there's a part of me that wants to be out there and not miss out on anything, and wants to make sure I make the most of my musical life. But then there's a part of me that just wants to feel content and enjoy the time with my family. But I think I do a pretty good job of balancing that. And my wife and I were having our first kid.
You have a baby on the way.
In about a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we do. So that's really, really exciting. Yeah, I found a great woman 5 years ago, and we've been married a couple of years now, and she's a big inspiration behind a lot of those songs.
Do you think about being a dad when you get up there on stage, and how you might change as a musician, and maybe some of those trade-offs or sacrifices you'll have to make as a parent?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. The most important thing is to remember, I've heard this, it's kind of a warning from so many older musicians. Their one regret is that they didn't spend as much time with their family, and they maybe were a little bit too invested in their work to the point where, they missed out on a lot of things.
We're talking with Wisconsin country singer Dan Lapine about growing up in the state, how he got started in country, and his debut album. It's called The Honky Tonk Traditional. Let's hear another song off Honky Tonk Traditional, and this one is called Country Proud.
The bass is really booming. They got a brand new version. They're calling it country somehow. But I like my country proud. A little steel guitar, a gal song on a fiddle, and a good old 3-chord song.
So this song is about your love of traditional country music, but it seems like there are also a bit of other feelings coming up. Can you talk about it?
I thought it was the best way to start off the first song on my debut album is just one that waves the flag for that kind of country music that I love. But nowadays, there's a lot of different kinds of country music, I guess. And, you know, that's a good thing in a way. But sometimes when you're out and about and you're like, man, this bar feels like a great country music place, but I'm hearing, you know, it doesn't feel like real country music what I'm hearing. So I guess the guy in the bar, he had some frustration. So that's definitely something I've had that I've related to at times. So I thought, you know, throw a little bit of that in there because I know there's people that feel just like me about that.
Tell us about your band. Who's with you on the road?
A gal named Emily Sabaki on the fiddle, Kenny Jones on the guitar, Andrew Lynch on the drums, Matt Vollmer on the bass. And yeah, so it's a 5-piece band. And then Cody Schleichert is our sound man, audio engineer, roadie. He does all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's all folks in southeastern Wisconsin, and they're all just incredibly talented musicians. I always was pretty picky with the musicians because I feel like to pull off that good country sound, you just need a really tight band of good players. So they really bring that to the table.
Let's listen to one more song. This one is called Where I'd Be.
Painting the town and painting my heart a deeper shade of blue. Just bumming around, living life just trying to get through. That's where I'd be without you.
I like this one a lot.
Oh, thank you.
I just think that it's reflective, but also sometimes, you know, sadder songs help us in a way, right? They I don't know, it just kind of help get us through.
Yeah, I kind of like this one. It combines sad and happy in a way because it's like talking about how somebody would be without their significant other. So I was thinking about if I didn't have this wife to keep my head on straight, you know, I was thinking how, you know, maybe potentially reckless my life could get. And so I started it out just talking about the reckless stuff, but then it kind of turns it around when it's like, yeah, so that's where I'd be without you. And yeah, I liked how it combined those kind of happy and sad feelings, I guess.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for this conversation and all the best to you out there on the road.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate y'all so much.
Dan Lapine is a country singer from Wisconsin. His latest album is the Honky Tonk Traditional, and he's on tour with stops all over the state.
Baby, don't you worry. Baby, don't stress. It's just something that I've got to do to kill the weight on my chest. And no, I ain't gone crazy. My heart didn't go astray. I've just got to jukebox my troubles away.
Big Tech is pushing its AI products on schools with promises like chatbots will help teachers grade assignments, prepare lesson plans, and draft recommendation letters for students. We'll be talking with 2025 Wisconsin Teachers of the Year next week about some of the thornier issues surrounding AI in the classroom and how they're approaching it. In subjects like literature, history, math, science, is there a role for AI? How will education change? And what is happening in your school with AI in teaching? Email us at wisconsintoday@wpr.org, or you can call or text to share your thoughts at 888-642-0232. Once again, the number 888-642-0232. Wisconsin Today producers include Rochelle Wilson, Trevor Hook, and Colleen Leahy. Our technical directors are Sarah Hopeful and Tyler Ditter. Tim Peterson is our managing producer, and Dean Knetter is executive producer. Learn more about us at wpr.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. You're listening to WPR News.